If anyone should have known Yekindar wasn't a promising player, wouldn't it be Zeus? If he owned the fucking team. This isn't the first time I've had to talk about Navi on this channel. The last video I did about them directly was when Simple and Electronic re-signed, and I said I wasn't too happy about it. I described them as being locked up in the contract, which a bunch of people who don't speak English got really confused about because they compared it to literal jail, when it's a fucking metaphor. Yeah, whatever. CSGO for you. Navi have been really underwhelming since the start of CSGO. Considering they are the biggest team from one of the biggest regions, they have been incredibly unsuccessful. They've always been one of the best teams, but they never had an era of dominance, and they haven't even won a major. Not a single major. Their best years have been not bad, but comparatively underwhelming, especially when you look at their peers. I mean, Fnatic, NIP, Luminosity/SK, Astralis, Virtus Pro, and shit. Even Liquid now have had more successful years than Navi. Just if you're looking at them like 12-month block by 12-month block. Now the issues are piling up. It goes beyond just them as an individual team not being quite good enough. The CIS region as a whole has transformed itself. It used to be a hellhole of just fronts for shady gambling websites, and now it's actually competitive and has multiple teams that are worth playing for. It used to be that if you were a young Russian-speaking pro, you wanted to play for Navi. They built their legend when they won 4 majors in a row in CS 1.6, and they brought all of that into Global Offensive, and that has essentially built their entire image, and all the players that have played for them from CS 1.6, their entire careers are built on that 4 major run. It's unreal how far that has got. If I'm a young Russian-speaking player now, I have 3 other options that are pretty realistic. Virtus Pro are a huge name. They even have their legacy roots all the way back in 1.6 as a Russian team, and they built a massive brand off the back of the Polish team in Global Offensive, and now they're back on the Russian side of things, except they're playing better than Navi. I think a lot of people would argue they're not the highest ranked team, but they're definitely the better looking team in terms of the Counter-Strike they're playing and the way their individuals are clicking and playing within their system. Gambit won a major in 2017. It was a little lucky, but still they beat Astralis, and they did it with some pretty big names on their side. So they built a lot of credit, a lot of hype with that performance, and now they've come back with this youngsters side who have been promoted and now have Hobbit with them, who have looked pretty sick as well. You could realistically, as a young player, aspire to play for Gambit now rather than just Navi. Then there's Team Spirit. Now, Team Spirit probably have the most to prove out of those 3, but still, they've climbed their way into the top 20 and stayed there for a long, long time. Then they got a chance against Tier 1 teams, and they actually did really well. So I see Team Spirit as a reasonable destination for any big, up-and-coming Russian player, or Ukrainian player, Belarusian player, Latvians apparently. I didn't realise that was a thing. The problem Navi have is that 2 years ago, they were the biggest name, they were the biggest fish. Right now, they have at least 2 changes to make to be a consistent, dominating team. And I'm not sure they can make them. They're no longer that overwhelming favourite in every transaction. The first change is long overdue. Flamie needs to go. He's been shit since 2019. I mean, some people would argue halfway through 2018 he turned to shit, but still. Since 2019, we can all agree he's been shit. He doesn't play the super supportive roles. He just baits and doesn't do much with it. He could have been replaced by now, if Navi gave a shit about improving their squad rather than just repping a brand, but he hasn't. The problem hasn't been a lack of available players either. Mir, Hobbit, and Yekindar have all been signed in the time period where he's been at his shittest, and they haven't replaced him with any of them. In fact, all those players have been signed by different rivals of Navi. Mir went from Gambit to Spirit, so it's not like it's impossible for one of the big CIS names to poach a player from another one. I mean, sure, they caught Gambit in a lull, but Navi, where's their scouting department? Yekindar signed from Pro 100, which is a team I'm pretty sure owned by Zeus. If anyone should have known Yekindar wasn't a promising player, wouldn't it be Zeus? If he owned the fucking team. And he was still with Navi at the time, and still deeply involved with the team, so why not? To be real though, it's not that surprising that Navi haven't made the changes they need to make, especially when it comes to flaming. They have a incredibly long, incredibly silly record of just not cutting players when they need to be cut and holding on to them because they have a brand associated with them. Edward and Zeus are great examples of players who really just feasted off of their 1.6 success long after they stopped being really good players. I mean, even Senya lasted, just over a year on Navi in Global Offensive? even though he was basically a bot at that point. He wasn't even great in 1.6. Many argue he should have been cut in 1.6, but he made it into Global Offensive, stayed shit, and then didn't get removed for over a year. Don't quote me on the over a year part, but it was a long time. Basically, what I'm getting at is that it looks like it's flamie's turn to just steal checks whilst playing subpar Counter-Strike. The next change I would push for, maybe it's a strong word, but I would advocate in favour of would be either Blade or Boomich. My first instinct, just on what I've seen and what I've heard, is that Blade would be the one to be removed. Well, if an outside observer was involved, Blade would be the first to be removed. It's Blade's system that the team plays in, it's Blade's philosophy for the game that dictates and shapes the way they play, and the way they play looks horrible. Seriously, if Simple's not bailing them out, the team doesn't really seem to know what's going on. The craziest part of this is, Electronic made his name playing with Blade in Flipside in 2016, and now he's got him under him. He's a coach, and he can't seem to get the most out of him. Electronic's rating is what, 1.06 I think this year, which is pedestrian. Those who remember the Flipside days when Electronic was late rounds, post plants, multi-kill after multi-kill, he would win you rounds time and time again. In Navi, the only person who seems to be able to do that consistently is Simple, and then Perfecto comes in with the occasional clutch, but he's not really that much of a game changer outside of the clutch rounds. Like the guy, great, supportive, glue guy, not really your superstar. Electronic was supposed to be that. It was supposed to be Simple and Electronic, an unbreakable CIS duo, and Electronic's performances haven't been up there. They've been slowly getting worse, and I think a lot of that has to do with the system. There is still reason to believe that a part of the blame lies with Boomich. Boomich is the man applying the system, making round by round calls, and especially importantly, making mid-round calls and late-round calls, which is where we've seen a lot of their strats fall apart. Running onto the bomb site with 4 enemies still alive and trying to plant the bomb furiously and then getting picked off one by one. That seems like it could be Boomich's fault, let's be honest. The fact that Boomich has already been replaced on Mirage leads me to believe that the players, and maybe even Boomich himself, don't really have the most confidence in his calling. So maybe the fault lies there. The perfect scenario for me is to bring in Chopper, bring in Mir, and honestly, I'm not really fussed about coaches. It seems any ex-pro from the CIS region gets to be a coach now, so just pick one. They're going to pick someone I've never thought of or heard of before anyway. In Mir, you've got a more aggressive, more potent, more impactful rifler, and in Chopper, you've got a more experienced IGL. You've got a guy who, on an individual level, has shown he's very capable of playing amongst the best. This isn't an MSL situation where you're bringing him in because he's smart, and then the player alongside it just happens to be there. Chopper can hold his own. However, I really doubt these moves are going to happen. Spirit seem, they should be at least pretty happy with the players they have, and Navi aren't exactly renowned for forking out for big buyouts, so those moves aren't going to happen. What's far more likely to happen is this rumour that I've heard that Munzi is going to be promoted to the first team when he turns 16, and that's when flamie's going to be removed. I'm not exactly overexcited about this. I'm not saying Munzi isn't a skilled or promising player. I just don't think he solves the problems. He doesn't change the system, he doesn't change the strategy, he doesn't change the calling, does he? He just comes in and fills in flamie's roles. His stats and the little I've seen of him play implies that he plays pretty similarly to flamie in terms of not being the most aggressive player, and he's got a decent rating but low impact, low deaths per round, mainly carrying that. I'm not sure that's what Navi needs. The reason I'm advocating so heavily for Mir and Chopper is, well, Chopper also likes to be aggressive, but Mir especially is a guy who is very aggressive, will take fights, and is willing to, change things up. Bringing in Munzi does not bring in the change of pace that bringing in Chopper and or Mir would. I'd argue they need a highly aggressive player like a Yekindar, like a Mir, who can just change the tempo when just waiting for the bomb to plant itself doesn't work out. Big surprise. I can speculate all I want. I know that Navi notoriously do whatever the fuck they want and don't listen to external input. It's more than likely we're going to wait a bit. Munzi will get promoted. The team will continue to be, good enough to win 2 ST LANs a year at best, and Simple will continue to waste away and not be the greatest of all time because he simply doesn't have the resume to back up his individual skill. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you have any thoughts on Navi, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm right, leave it in the comments. We can have a chat about it. Sub if you want to see more. And that's all for this one. Goodbye.